Let's take a look at this.
What's happening, Professor? You trying to call an arrow?
How you doing, Sean? Did you get my email?
The what? The one with the better link? Yeah.
And did you use it?
Well, if you saw your email recently, then yeah, I would answer your question probably.
Well, I don't see an email from you in my email, so that's why I'm asking you the question. Looks like we're going to have maybe a couple of new participants today from another class. So if you are coming from that group, welcome.
Yeah, I gave you another email on web courses.
I have no notification of it yet. I'll keep an eye peeled for it.
That's weird because I just sent it at 2:38. The only thing that's missing is the signatures from George and I, but we're going to handle that later.
Right. Good. All righty. Well, I've asked, we have a visiting speaker. I see another Film Florida logo in the background. That's excellent. So we have Lisa Mills joining us here shortly to talk to you guys about Film Florida. We have a representative, Mark Felbinger, from Film Florida here to talk to you about that organization, which I think you're going to find very interesting. And then we'll talk a little bit about some independent filmmaking techniques and things involving documentary production, because I know that there's a couple of you that are interested in that, and what it's like to work with organizations like local PBS affiliates. So this should be an interesting conversation today. Mark, I wasn't aware that you were going to be on the line today, but I'd like to welcome you to the meeting. Appreciate your attendance. Would you like to introduce yourself really quickly, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Felbinger. I'm actually one of the MFA students in the feature film production program at UCF. I am also a Film Florida member. I've been a member since 2015 after I graduated from UCF in my undergrad in the bachelor's program in cinema studies.
Terrific. Excellent. All right. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? I know, Sean, we're working on your budget about the Coca-Cola initiative, because we are fast approaching the ultimate deadline, which is tomorrow night. I'm assuming at the close of business, although they didn't indicate whether they would allow submissions after normal business hours, and they are on Central Time. So if it is close of business, that would be what, 8 o'clock our time, 6 o'clock Central Time, or midnight. I would assume the former, and get your stuff in tomorrow by about 6 or 7 p.m. our time to make sure that you make the deadline. You guys good for your Coca-Cola stuff if you're participating?
Now all we got to do is do our signatures and then to submit our applications and answer their questions.
Well, you should, yeah, okay. You should have that application filled out. I will get your budget signed as soon as it appears in my mailbox.
Appreciate
and I'll
it.
send that back to you as soon as possible. I got your resume, George. Did you see my notes?
Yes, I did, and I'm working on my resume right now, and I'll probably send you another version sometime next week.
Okay, so I lined out things that I would recommend you edit out of the text and left, modified or left existing text alone. I don't know if you can see that it's a very kind of a fine line that WPS uses in that editing function. But hopefully, if you looked at it at least 100% on your document image size, that you saw the line, the line through edits.
Going through it, I actually don't really see a red line. All it really looks like is that you spaced it out, and now I have 2 pages.
You shouldn't have 2 pages. It was 1 page when I sent it back to you. Could be a formatting thing. So I'm using the Google WPS, which is a word processing, application, but it's using the same architecture as Microsoft Word, but it's not a Microsoft product. So there might have been a little bit of formatting that didn't quite jive when it went back to your system, because I think your doc was a Word doc that you sent me.
Yeah, I sent you a Word document, and I see, stuff you crossed out.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. There's line throughs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to work on it some more.
Okay. Well, let me know if you have any other questions about that. I think that it'll be a pretty comprehensive document at that point. You should strive to keep it all on 1 page if it's possible.
Right.
So, I think I was able to keep my resume 1 page for a really long time. It's 2 pages now, but I send it out as a page 1, a back-to-back document. So it's really technically still 1 piece of paper. But I think that is less sort of intimidating for an employer to not have a whole stack of papers to look at, just 1 sheet. Front to back's not too bad, but have all of your main bullet points and all of the information you want to lead with on the front page. So
right,
you'll be fine. I think it's a good looking document at this point. You might consider making your heading a little smaller, right? So your name, and then on the second line, you had your position seeking, right?
Yeah, the top, at the very top, is my name.
Right.
And then underneath that, the job I'm seeking is video editor assistant. So I'll just make the
maybe your
name
name could be
smaller.
Like a little bit smaller.
It does take up a lot of space. So okay.
I mean, I like to have the name just a tiny bit larger, so it's kind of stands out at the top of the page, but I think you can go a little bit smaller to conserve a little space if for some reason in Microsoft Word something's spilling off onto page 2. That might help you keep it all on 1 page.
Right. Okay. Sounds good.
Well, we're just waiting for Lisa. I asked her to come in at 3:15, so that's 2 minutes away. If anybody has any other questions about, I don't know, your assignments or anything that was covered in this week's module, you can go ahead and we can address that now. Otherwise, we're just basically waiting for Lisa at this point. Are you guys following the IATSE thing?
Yes, I saw that the IATSE and the producers guild finally came up with
It's a
with the
tentative
deal.
agreement. It's a
Yeah.
tentative agreement. What has to happen is just like with the strike initiative, they had to send the strike initiative out to all of the disciplines, the entire membership of the IATSE. The contract ratification also has to go out to all the disciplines in the IATSE, and there has to be another 3/4 majority approval of the ratification. Otherwise, that contract won't be approved and the strike will move forward. So there's still a little time. I think they have till the end of the week to ratify that, to avoid the overall general strike. So, but it looks pretty good. I think they got most of what they want. So we'll see. We got probably another, 2.5 days, I guess. So We'll see. Fingers are crossed. I think the producers union is still trying to duck out of a few fringe benefit concessions, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Oh,
Yeah.
and here she is. All righty. Well, we'll give her a moment or two to get situated, and then we'll move forward. There she is. Hi, Lisa. How are you? Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I want to move forward then with our discussion today. So we have Dr. Mills here. She is a representative of Film Florida at the administrative level. So she's going to have a lot of useful information about how that organization works, how it can affect you, not only now, but as you emerge out into the industry, as you graduate and you get out there into the field. Film Florida is one of those organizations that is really out there looking out for you. Not only do they have local influence and production that goes on, and they have a lot of information that can help you in terms of looking for work, but they are also very active at the state level. And they're one of the institutions, one of the organizations that has a finger on the pulse of things like Florida incentives. I'm sure that there was a lot of discussion, and you guys can tell me at the Film Florida level about the IATSE strike initiative and about those kinds of events that are happening, those waves that are running through the industry at this point in time and how they affect you here in Florida. So I want to turn the discussion over to Lisa Mills, and I also want to make you a co-host because I think you said you had some documents to share or some websites that you wanted to direct us to. So I will turn it over to you. We've welcomed Mark here as well, and we want to go ahead and give you the floor. So thank you very much for coming, Dr. Mills. I appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate your having me, Mike. I'm happy to be here. Hello, everybody. And I would really like to begin, since Mark is here, sort of sharing the floor with him and his perspective as a student member of Film Florida here. We'll address that first, if that's okay, Mike, and then
Sure.
we'll go into from there the legislation that Film Florida is working on, some of the research that I've conducted for Film Florida. And then after that, if there's any time left, if you want to talk to me, if you want me to talk about documentary production and distribution on public television, I can do a little bit of that toward the end. But Mark, hi, good to see you. It's been a while. Excited about your continued production this weekend. Wishing you all the best for that.
Thank you.
Mark, I think what I'll do is pull up the home page for Film Florida and share that. And while I do that, what I'd like to hear is your perspective on what this organization is and what it does and why students like you have joined. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that as I share the web page with everyone.
Sure. Hi, everyone again. So for me, Film Florida has been, in a lot of ways, very helpful. It's allowed me to network and socialize amongst independent filmmakers here in Florida, as well as filmmakers that have come to Florida for like the annual Film Florida meetings. It has allowed me to kind of feel like I'm not the only one trying to find, work or a job. And for me, Film Florida is just one of those things that it just allows me to talk more. And I just froze. I deeply apologize. Oop. So, apparently my thing went to. There you go. But yes, Film Florida to me is just one of those things that just allows me to network. So if you have really bad networking skills, it makes you feel comfortable and it allows you to branch out a little bit more and so on and so forth. So I'm just very happy to be a part of the members and all.
Yeah, they've got a little Film Florida sizzle clip that I think would be fun for to share with them. Mike, I'll just scroll down here. This is the homepage for the organization. And what they do is they are the major film industry advocacy organization in the state of Florida. Film Florida helps producers who want to shoot films in Florida with locations, with locating local crew, with locating local cast, pardon me, with connecting with the filmmaking community in Florida, around Florida. And then, so it helps people from Hollywood that want to make movies here. It's a networking group for film production professionals. It also involves all of the Film Commission offices across Florida, along with the main Film Commission office in Tallahassee. And then on the membership side, for those of us that are members, it's an opportunity to network with other people that are involved in film production and film production education in Florida. I'll just go to the membership page here. And you can see that there are a lot of things that they talk about here that are benefits if you join Film Florida. I'm not going to do a promo video or anything for them, but down here you can see that they do have an annual membership for students. It's only $25. It gets you into all of their meetings so that you can network with the members and you can get on their email list and learn what's going on with film incentives in Florida and whether films are coming to town. It just keeps you sort of in the loop or in the know in terms of what the film industry is doing in Florida. And you should know that your university and your film program are highly engaged with all of these efforts. As the chair of the Education Council for Film Florida, I bring to the table a voice for you, a voice for students and for faculty. And for, if you can believe it, there are 49 different educational film programs operating in Florida right now. Now that 49 includes state universities like the University of Florida, state college programs like Eastern Florida State College in Titusville has a film production program. Other colleges such as Valencia, I know Mike has been very involved with Valencia. The for-profit film programs such as Full Sail, Mike has been there as well. Nonprofit film programs, certification programs, and also trade schools. All of those combined represent 49 different educational film entities in Florida. I imagine you didn't know there were that many. I didn't know there were that many either until I started doing some research. I'll talk about that research in just a moment. But let's go back to the home page and let's see if we can see the sizzle reel, because it's a fun video to watch and it'll give you a good idea of sort of what they do. So this is just sort of the sizzle reel of all the films and TV shows that have been shot recently in Florida. So Film Florida is all about film production, but also television, digital media, game design, animation, all of the entertainment production that goes on in Florida. Film Florida promotes that. of incredible. Most people who live in Florida, I think, unless it's something obvious like the space stuff, I don't think they have really any idea how much film and TV production is going on here. So we do have production going on here. A lot of it is commercial production. I'm sure that Mike has told you he has his finger on the pulse. I'm sure he's talked to you a lot about the commercial production opportunities in Florida, and movie making and reality programming. There's a lot of Hallmark movies being shot over in the Tampa Bay area. Of course, South Florida is a very active area. And even though Florida does not have any state tax incentives, there are tax incentives on the local level. So some cities like Tampa, Miami have their own incentives passed by their city commissions, and counties like Hillsborough County have county incentives at that level too. But one of Film Florida's main efforts is to try to bring back a statewide incentive program. So Mike, if you want, I'll kind of segue into talking about those efforts right now.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm not going to go into all of the history of the incentive program in Florida. I do have a excellent research paper that was written about the history of incentive programs in Florida. And this research paper also covers the relationship between politicians in the film industry since the beginning of the film industry in the late 1800s. And it's a dissertation written by David Morton, and it won Best Dissertation Award at UCF a couple of years ago. And it's a really fascinating piece of work that goes into the history of the love-hate relationship between politicians and the film industry here. It's a fascinating read. I have my students in my research methods class read it, and I'd be happy to send you a link to it later if you're interested in reading in great detail, because it's fascinating. But I'll just tell you that most recently in our lifetimes, there were film incentives that were happening in the 90s on into the early 2000s. There was a lot of work going on in Orlando at the studios. Disney had stuff going on. Universal had stuff going on. Nickelodeon was going on here. And it seemed like we were going to become Hollywood East. That's what they called it anyway. And they were hiring local people. Of course, they were bringing in folks from elsewhere as well. And it was putting money into the economy. And unfortunately, by the mid 2000s, though, our state legislative complexion had changed. It had become extremely economically conservative. There were also questions being raised nationally about film incentives. There were a few abuses of film incentives, I guess, by some unethical producers that weren't really putting much money into the economy wherever it was they were making films. And I guess the effect of that was to make conservatives in particular skeptical of whether or not tax incentives for filmmakers were really good for a state's economy. You also have to understand that there is a difficult relationship between Hollywood and conservative elected officials, because Hollywood tends to be very liberal and doesn't tend to vote for Republicans. And so when you get Republicans in control, they're not big fans of the film industry. And I think it would be fair to say that that entered into the decision to sunset the legislation that had set up the film incentive program. And I can't remember exactly what year that was. Mike, you might be more familiar with that, but I believe it may have been between 2011 and 2015, I believe, is when the incentive definitely went away. By sunset, I mean that our Florida legislature, controlled by Republicans, decided not to fund it anymore. So there wasn't any money to provide the incentives anymore.
The thing of it
Since
is
then,
I think the reality of the sunset happened a lot earlier than that. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I was out in LA by 2003, but I remember in the in early first, second quarter of 2003, I mean, the general understanding on the street was that the incentive budget that they had allocated was a token gesture, really, and it was so small that it really only took one or two serious productions, one feature, one TV show, for instance, could come in and gobble up all the money that was available. So while we had an incentive program, in reality, we had an incentive program that was of very little value in terms of stimulating the economy because there wasn't enough money in there to attract productions to come from out of state. If two productions could tank the bank account, then there really wasn't much incentive for other productions to come here. And so it really was probably not an earnest effort from the very beginning. And this goes all the way back to you made a comment about the early days of Hollywood East in Florida. And I remember specifically, you may remember Governor Martinez. But Governor Martinez clearly, I mean, in the press, called the film industry and the members working in the film industry carnival trash. So that was the sentiment coming out of Tallahassee regarding the people working in the film industry and the industry in general trying to take a foothold in Florida. And I think that we have forever been in competition with the tourist industry at Disney and Universal Studios, and with agriculture, and with other industries like the industrial complex that's here in Mass, for any and all funding coming from state and federal sources for those industries. And the movie industry was just not on that high on that list of priorities.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Governor Martinez, probably before the time of any of our students here, but I remember the effort to win him over by giving him a cameo appearance in the James Bond movie that
Yeah.
was shot in, I believe it was shot, it was at the Miami airport or something, but you see our governor, I think, is a taxi driver or something like that in the James Bond movie that was shot in South Florida at the time. I know that the most recent incentive was sunset during Governor Rick Scott's administration, and he served 2 terms. So that sort of gives us the time frame of when it was last when it was last active and funded in Florida. But since it was sunset, it's really been an uphill battle to try to bring any kind of film incentive back to Florida. But the Film Florida organization is the one behind these efforts. And they have a lobbyist in Tallahassee that they pay. And this lobbying firm works very hard to try every year to get the legislation passed. And they work very hard to get a sponsor on the House and a sponsor in the Senate. And let me just share again with you from the Film Florida website how this works, because I think it's important to understand what it takes to get something like this through. Let's see. If we go here to the Film Florida website, you can see that they even have a tab over here for legislative efforts, because this is one of the main things that people in Florida's film production industry are interested in, is what efforts are being made, where do those efforts stand? So what they do is they provide you here with this interesting little diagram of like what it takes for a bill to become law, for a bill to bring incentives back to Florida to become law. And I was chuckling as I was looking at this, because I was listening earlier, Mike, to the journalism faculty complaining about the fact that the journalism students have so little knowledge of the way our government works, and how they could try to, they're struggling to teach civics inside journalism classes so that our journalism students can do a decent job of covering how the way government operates. And I ought to show them this little diagram that Film Florida has put together on how a bill becomes law. So that's kind of interesting there to see. What you would want to do is scroll down to the bottom here if you're interested in getting active in this battle, because this tells you how you can do something to help this fight. You can call your state representative, you can send them a letter, send them an email, meet with them in person. You can even post on social media. And I've got here in front of me a legislative update on where things stand with the bill. So the bill right now, it was written 3 years ago. And we know that conservative politicians don't like the word incentive now. They're very skeptical about the word incentive when it's related to the film industry, even though they offer economic incentives to other kinds of industries all the time to get them to come and move a medical lab to Central Florida. They'll give them a discount on property tax or something. But when it comes to the film industry, for some reason, they don't like the word incentive. So we're not actually calling the bill that we're trying to get passed right now a tax incentive bill. The official name of it is a targeted rebate program, a targeted rebate program. And this bill has been in place for 3 years now, but it hasn't made it out of legislative committees to the House floor or the Senate floor for a vote. So what happens is they get co-sponsors in the House and Senate. They write the bill. Film Florida's lobbyists have their imprint on it. I even have kind of a little bit of contribution that I've made since I came on board with Film Florida as Education Council Chair. I asked them to write something in it that required film production companies who shot in Florida to offer internships. So there's just a little modicum of education in this targeted rebate program now. And what happens is once the bill is drafted in the House and the Senate, it has to go through a series of committees. And then once it passes through all of the committees, like the Commerce Committee and all of that, then it can go to the full House floor and then the Senate floor for a full vote. But unfortunately, for the past 3 years, it has not made it out of committee for a full vote. Now, the bill sponsors are, I will tell you who they are, Representative Holly Rothschein and former Representative Mike Miller in the House. And I don't have at hand right now who the Senate sponsor is. I think that they may be working on that anew because I believe the Senate co-sponsor maybe either didn't run for re-election or wasn't re-elected. So they may be seeking a new Senate co-sponsor right now. But anyway, what happens is Film Florida meets with all the legislators. And in fact, last year, Film Florida completed 73 meetings with our state lawmakers. Film Florida met with Florida's chief financial officer, Jimmy Petronis, to go over the bill with him and show him why it would be a good bill for Florida. It was financially sound. And they continue to update the language in the bill to make it more attractive to Republicans. And Film Florida is even now awarding legislative star awards because legislators love to get awards because they can talk about them to their constituents. And we give these star awards to lawmakers that support the film industry. So Film Florida is working very hard to bring this targeted rebate program. And they are also releasing op-eds in newspapers. So what I'll do is I'll share that and then I'll just read you some of the highlights from this. I'll go now to.
While you're pulling that up, Lisa, I would just like to put the question to the attendees at this point in time. How many of you voted in the last midterm elections? I'm not talking about the presidential that we just had. I'm talking about the midterm elections, which would have been 2.5 years ago at this point. And you know that we have another midterm election coming up in 2022, right? So here's the civic dynamics of what the problem is here. Okay. You have a Republican majority in the legislature. So the first thing that you need before you're going to get a bill like this passed in Tallahassee legislature is you need a full Democratic majority. Okay. And the only way to get a full Democratic majority is for you guys to get out there and vote for the party that supports your career and your career endeavor. Okay. So if the whole purpose of government is to be for and by the people, then the political party that you think is going to serve your best interests needs to be supported in the vote. Okay. And to this point, and historically, the Republican Party has not been in favor of things like tax incentives. They have not been in favor of things like unionism. Okay. They have not been in favor of things like uh, programs of this nature in a lot of walks of life. So the first thing we have to do is we have to recapture a Democratic majority in Tallahassee. The reason why you really need a Democratic majority is not so that we can say, yay, Democrats win and Republicans lose. The problem is when you have a Republican majority in the legislature in Tallahassee, all of the committee chairs are going to be Republicans. Okay, for the most part. So if a bill doesn't get out of committee, that's because the opposing faction doesn't want that bill to come out of committee. So the Republican chair will not allow that bill to come out of committee. They'll say we don't have enough votes to come out of committee or whatever it is, magic voodoo that they want to say is going on, but they'll stifle that plan in committee and it will never reach the floor. And if by some miracle it did reach the floor, you have Republicans in charge of the Senate and in the House of Representatives, and both of those party leaders are not going to allow a vote to come to the floor because it's not in their party's best interest. Okay. So anybody can introduce a bill in the House of Representatives in the state of Florida, but it's never going to get out of committee if it's not politically in favor, and it's certainly not going to get a vote if it's not politically in favor. So really what this is a lesson, a very rudimentary lesson in civics, which is you guys need to make sure you get out and vote. One person indicated to me that they voted in the last midterm election. Okay. Part of the business of film business is that you have to be paying attention to the things that affect your ecosystem. Okay. And right now, if you just did a line by line item of the Republican Party platform in Florida and the Democratic Party platform in Florida, you'll find that there is virtually no support for your career goals in the House of Representatives or in the Senate in the state of Florida. There's not a majority that can help you with your endeavor. So is not just enough for you to be a good editor or a good writer or a good camera person or a good lighting technician. You also have to be politically minded and politically active to make sure that your career goals and the community that you're trying to serve and support and help flourish is going to benefit through equal and adequate representation at the Tallahassee level. So really, we can say that the onus really is coming back on us as the constituents of the state of Florida to make sure that the people that we appoint to go to Tallahassee will listen to what we want and give us what we need in order for us to contribute to the economic growth of the state of Florida. And it's statistically proven, and the numbers bear it out, that the film industry can provide billions of dollars annually in income that can come into the state of Florida through outside sources of studio financing, production costs, supplies, infrastructure, hiring practices. All of those dollars can come into the state of Florida in the tune of billions. Okay. And the problem is it pales in comparison, for instance, to the multi hundreds of billions that Disney alone is going to bring in. So while it's a relatively small voice compared to some of the competition, it's really, economically speaking, a significant amount of money that can do a lot of good just in Central Florida alone, not to mention North and South Florida. So It's really on us to make sure that we're active and we represent when the time comes. When it's called upon us to do our civic duty and go out and vote, make sure you do that. End of my
Yeah, I
commercial.
would say, I agree with Mike. Certainly we want to encourage you to vote for the candidate that best represents your beliefs, right? And I will say, since this is being recorded, there are actually a few Republican lawmakers in the House and Senate that do support the targeted rebate bill. But their challenge is convincing their fellow party members. That's really where that challenge lies. But I put a link to this particular article in the chat so that you can read it later, because it's a really good op-ed that talks about how filmmaking is leaving Florida and going to Georgia. And that really sort of segues me, Mike, into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is some research that I've done for Film Florida about you guys, about film students in Florida attending these 49 different degree programs. And what you are telling us about the job you think you're going to get right out of college, where you think you're going to get that job, the job you hope you'll have 5 years after college, and where you think you'll have that job. So Mike, with your permission, I will next share the research that I have conducted for Film Florida, and I will be presenting this research to Florida lawmakers in Tallahassee in November. So what you're about to see, they're going to see too sometime in November, some of them. So let me go ahead and open up my PowerPoint, and then I will share it. All right. So this is a presentation that I gave with a film professor at Full Sail and one of our film MFA graduate students here at UCF in August at the University Film and Video Association. That is our conference that film professors go to every summer. We go there to compare notes about how we teach things. We go there to present research. We go there to show each other the films we're working on. The University Film and Video Association meets every year. I'm a member, and several other faculty members are members, and we go there and do research each year. So the title of the presentation that we gave was The Film Student Diaspora, Exporting Graduates to States with Incentives. So the first thing here is we just sort of go into what we're going to talk about here, which is the methodology of the study. We have preliminary results, why these results are significant, what they show, and then we did a feedback with the audience. And these were some of the research questions here. We wanted to know, why are film education programs experiencing increasing enrollment in a state that does not offer film production tax incentives? You may be aware that our film program here at UCF has nearly doubled in size over the past 5 years, even though we're in a state with no incentives. So why is that happening? We wanted to try to find out. We want to know what job students expect to get immediately upon graduation and 5 years following graduation. And Film Florida wanted us to find out where students expect to get those jobs. So that's what we were going for. And we had some hypotheses as well. We had a feeling that students know about job opportunities next door in Atlanta, that they expect to get jobs as production assistants first, and that they expect to leave Florida to get those jobs. Those were our hypotheses going into this. Then we gave everybody some background on tax incentives. We've already talked about those. This could be interesting for you. Take a look at this map. This is a map of where the 49 different degree programs exist in Florida, offering everything from film and television degrees to digital media to animation and game design. And this is a list that we came up with. We updated Film Florida's list for them. And one of the reasons why we wanted to do this research is because Film Florida didn't really have any accurate data on any of this, and we wanted to provide that for them. And that's more about film incentives. And then this just explains that we're conducting our research in 4 phases. The first thing we did was come up with a list of institutions offering film and related media degrees. Then we collected information about what those degrees are like. Then we asked those institutions to administer a student survey. And in phase 4, Mike, we're looking at possibly surveying professionals in film production and union members. So I'll be back in touch with you about helping me with that later. So here are the results of our survey. I'm just going to skip through the raw numbers to the proportions. So we, by August, we had collected information from 5 different educational institutions in Florida. That's not many out of the 49, but we have collected more since then. We saw that the majority of them are public, some are private nonprofit, and then fewer are private for-profit. I'm just going to go by a little bit of this. Here's the different degrees that are being offered. As you can see, the majority of the degrees are film degrees. After that, animation, then AR, VR, and then television. Mark, I think I showed this in grad seminar one time, didn't I?
I believe you did.
Yes.
I believe you.
And this is interesting here. This is their combined student population for their degrees. So in other words, if they offer both film and media and TV and animation and AR, VR, the combined student population. So you can see here that most of those degree programs only have 50 to 100 students in them. But some of the degree programs are like ours. They have more than 1,000 students. And then we were looking at number of faculty, full-time and part-time, and how they track the job placement success of their students after graduation. Then we'll get into the more interesting student surveys. Here they are. So we asked students, what kind of position in film, media, or game production do you expect to get immediately upon graduation? And our hypothesis was supported here. The vast majority of students responding to the survey selected production assistant. After that was editing and camera department. Then we wanted to know, where do you expect to get the first job? Now, this really was surprising to us and does not support our hypothesis at all. We found that most of the students surveyed thought that they would get this production assistant job in Florida. About half as many said they expected to go outside Florida. A small proportion expected to go abroad. Now, we asked them for their level of optimism in getting this job at that location immediately following graduation on a scale of 1 to 10. And we saw that most of the students were moderately optimistic about getting a production assistant job in Florida. And we asked them what kind of position they thought they would be able to get 5 years after graduation. And this is interesting. Mike, take a look at this. The majority of students thought that within 5 years, they'd be directing or they'd be a DP. I hope they're that successful. I'm glad they're optimistic. Next question was where they expected to be 5 years after graduation. And look, a significant difference here, 5 years after graduation. The vast majority of respondents believe that they'll be outside Florida by then. Of course, Film Florida is interested in that. because in 5 years they'll be earning more money and they'll be able to tell state lawmakers that they're going to get those high paying jobs outside the state. In other words, we're training a workforce for other states. Students remained optimistic about their chances 5 years after graduation.
Unfortunately,
And
I think, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I have one more. This is the last slide, Mike. This is interesting. Select the location that would be your first choice of places to live and work in film and media production. And look how high up Florida is. It's just right behind California. Georgia, right behind that. So the majority of students earning a film education in Florida really would like to work in Florida or Georgia, though a good amount of them would also like to work in California. So like I said, we have more results that we've collected since August, but I've looked at those results and they do not change significantly, even though we've collected a lot more data. Any questions about that?
I think unfortunately that some of that data might be skewed without additional information that wouldn't necessarily appear to be relevant to the survey, but you have to ask other underlying questions. For instance, what's the average age of these students and what's the likelihood that they remember or even have any knowledge of the industry such that it existed in the year 2000 in Orlando as opposed to 2020? If you take a look at the environment and the economics of 2000, for instance, in Orlando, and then you take a look at the economics of scale in Orlando in 2020, you're going to find a drastic reduction in production activity between those 2 years. And in 20 years, there's been a gradual reduction annually of productivity, dollars being spent, of activity coming to the state of Florida. If you include that knowledge into the survey, if the people that you're asking of these questions, you might find different responses to a number of these questions. You might also ask yourself, when a student anticipates finding a job right out of college, first in Florida for the first 5 years, that might have to do with other economics that have nothing to do with their career ambition. For instance, are they in a position to move out of the state of Florida? Did they even start in the state of Florida to begin with? How many of those students were students that came from outside the state of Florida to attend college at UCF? How many of them are natives to Central Florida? And the reason they select working in Central Florida first is because that's where they're from, that's where their family is, and that's where their economics are immediately tied. If you are asking students that have the ability upon graduation to go anywhere they want with unrestricted access and not accounting for financial need, they probably would all choose California or New York as their first choice, because when money's not an object, why not? So there's other information I think that we really need in order to make that data truly reflective of what the reality is. And then secondly, I think that there is a gross misunderstanding on the part of a lot of students of what the industry at large really is and what it consists of. We have to ask these students what their perception of the industry is. What do you think a job in the film industry entails? And a lot of them probably won't be able to give you an answer that's accurate to the reality of what it can be or what it once was here in Orlando. So there's a lot of information, I think, that's not being held into account, and those numbers might bear out a change accordingly. I think one of the clues in the data that you currently possess is the vast majority of them after 5 years fully don't expect to be working gainfully in Florida. And that's the telling piece of data right there. They might choose to work in Florida first and foremost, but even in their young minds that haven't experienced the depth and the breadth of the industry yet, they know after 5 years that they're not going to be working in Florida in the film business if they want to stay working as a filmmaker. That, I think, is the telling piece of data. So what we have to do is we have to educate people on what the potentials are. Don't limit the scope of their dreams as to what the career can truly look like, and then help shape that into a reality that can come back at last to Florida, where it was once a burgeoning industry here. From 1985 until 2003, Orlando was a viable production city, and there was a lot of work going on. Okay. And there was stuff that happened here in Florida that didn't even make the sizzle in the beginning of the presentation. Sequest was here. Superboy was here. Superforce was here. Swamp Thing, the TV series, was here. Bad Boys 1 and Bad Boys 2 shot here. Too Fast and Too Furious shot here. Okay. And a lot of other projects that shot here that weren't mentioned in that. Okay. The industry was here. There was a reason why we were using the term Hollywood East back in the day, because there really was a potential for Orlando to become what Atlanta has become. Atlanta is a prime example of what public and political will is capable of. Okay. It just took, now granted, Georgia was giving out 30% tax rebates for production, and they put as much money into those coffers as was required to meet the percentage, not to meet a dollar figure. They committed to having the industry in Georgia. And therefore, when they said 30%, I don't think they really knew what the dollar figure was going to be that was going to attach itself in that capacity. But it didn't matter to them because they wanted the income, they wanted the economics, where there wasn't a whole lot before. Okay, so it's really political will, and it's the understanding of what was here and what's here now and what the difference is and what we have to do to get back to that place, because I think it's completely possible. The only thing you have to realize about the film industry and at large, like for instance, television, it's very fashionable. So once upon a time, it was very fashionable for beaches, astronauts, things of that nature to be featured in television shows. That was what people were thinking about. And Florida was rich in all of those assets and all of those possibilities. So what has to happen is the fashion of what people want to see on the screen has to come back around to the types of things we have to offer, and or we need the infrastructure to go inside on a soundstage and create any world that's possible to imagine and build it and shoot it inside at Universal, at MGM Studios. Okay. The things that we use those studios for now is depressing, to say the least. Okay. Universal Studios is now, one of the sound stages is a warehouse. The other one is rented out for banquets, and another becomes Hollywood Horror Nights once a year. And production and feature films and the things that used to exist in those stages, and I know because I was there, would make what they're doing now pale in comparison. And MGM Studios was the same thing. From the Earth to the Moon, the first major TV series shot by HBO with a budget of $90 million, shot at MGM Studios in Orlando, Florida, for everything except the lunar surface when we needed to do the astronauts actually standing on the moon. That was done at Hermosa Beach Studios in California. The rest of the series, all $90 million worth, which in those 1997 dollars equates to a heck of a lot more money, okay, was here in Orlando. And it put a lot of people to work. For a year, we were on that show. So you guys have to understand what used to be here and what's here now. And that should, if that doesn't incite you to take action, I don't know what will.
Well, I'd just like to take a moment to defend my research for a moment because
I'm not attacking your
as
research.
though,
I'm
Mike,
not
that
attacking.
you've invalidated it a bit. Actually, there are limitations to any kind of survey research that you can do, and surveying students nowadays is difficult. So our goal was to collect some basic data by asking students 6 simple questions. Had we put 25 or 30 questions on a survey, I don't think we'd have gotten very many results.
Yeah.
I think that you do bring up some very interesting intervening variables. In order to collect some of those intervening variable data, you have to collect demographic information from the students. It can take upwards of a year to obtain permission from the Institutional Review Board that oversees all of our university research to collect demographic data because it's personal data. And we knew that we wanted to move quickly. So we had to be very careful about the kinds of questions we could put on the survey. We couldn't collect any personal information or any kind of qualitative information from them because that would have had to have gone through a whole other lengthy approval process. So what we did was we put together a couple of surveys, one for the institutions and one for the students, that we felt could collect at least some baseline data, because before we did this, nobody had any data about what institutions were doing what, or what students thought about their chances of getting a job or where they could get that job. While there are some intervening variables and certainly a lot of limitations to what we did, I think that what we can do is interpret the survey as showing what student opinions are based on the education they're receiving. And you touched on that in your response. I think a lot of students are responding in a way that reflects what they're told in classes, which is that your first job is going to be a production assistant. And so most of them said that's what they thought their first job would be. They're probably being told in their classes, they're probably given some optimism about being able to get work in Florida, although most, as you know, of the production going on here now is commercial. But I do think it does say a few worthy things about where our students and our educational institutions are right now. And this will be a multi-phase project. And I'm hoping that in the coming year, we can move towards surveying people in the profession rather than students. And the limitations and restrictions for such surveys are greatly reduced, because what we're doing is we are surveying students that have a lot of FERPA privacy rights. And when we survey professionals like you that are in members of unions or out in the working in production, we don't have to worry about those kinds of research restrictions. So that's what we want to do next. In 2022, we want to move into the next phase of this research to find out what's going on out there with our film production professionals. Are they working in Georgia? Are they working in Florida? Are they commuting back and forth? What jobs are they getting? What kind of money are they making? While Film Florida, I think, has done a really good job of working on this legislation, what they haven't had is a resource to collect information about what's going on. The film commissions have a certain amount of that information, but really their information is limited too, because it's only regarding productions that go through their office, right? Which one would hope most of those productions do go through their office, but we know that some don't. But yeah, so that's just sort of a glance at where we are at in film production right now. I think students, if they want to work in this industry, they'll find a way. They'll find a path. They'll stay in Florida and find a path, or they'll find a way to get where they need to go to do what it is they're passionate about. That's the bottom line with anybody that works in this industry. You did that, Mike. Mark's in the process of doing that now. I've done that as well. So why don't we segue then, if we still have any time, into talking about starting locally and trying to get your content, your film, distributed nationally. Because I am a local yokel. I'm one of the film faculty members here at UCF who has never worked in Los Angeles or New York City. I born and raised in Florida, so how in the world was I able to make any films that would be on screens in Seattle, Washington, or Los Angeles, or New York City? Well, I followed the path because I make documentaries. I followed a path that's fairly common amongst documentary filmmakers, including the very famous Steve James, who was the director of Hoop Dreams, that was nominated for an Academy Award and started all kinds of conversations about the ethics of the Academy Awards in the early 90s. Steve James and I both, and Ross McElwee, another famous documentary filmmaker from the South, and all three of us are from the South. Steve James is from Virginia, Ross McElwee is from North Carolina, and I'm from Florida. And all three of us started out working in local television. And we do not have film degrees, by the way, the three of us. What we did from the very beginning in our jobs, starting as production assistants at TV stations, was work hard to find the best ways to tell stories. You know, whether you are writing a script in a television newsroom or you are making a little public affairs documentary about the status of affordable housing in Orlando, Florida. What you do when you work on the local level is you hone your storytelling skills by telling other people's stories and figuring out what works. How do you visualize concepts? You know, how do you focus on a theme and then illustrate it through characterization? I mean, even a 25-second voiceover news script has a main character, has a setting, and has a conflict. So I just want to encourage all of you to, if you don't have the means to go immediately to Los Angeles, New York, or even Atlanta, try to find some work to hone your skills here, you know, in Florida, and do good work, and then make better work and better work and better work until it gets you a ticket to go wherever it is you want to go next. So Steve, James, Ross McElwee, and me making little documentaries on the local level. At one point, I was a special projects producer at WESH Channel 2. I produced all the space shuttle coverage. I produced our spot news coverage. I produced a lot of special little commercial TV documentaries. And then I started freelancing for WMFE, the public television station in Orlando. The first little documentary I made was back when I was about 26 years old for a TV station in Jacksonville about the AIDS epidemic is what it was called. Our pandemic of the 80s, if you will. I just have been making little documentaries ever since. And I came to UCF originally to teach in the radio television division and did that for 6 years, and then wound up transferring into the film program because that is where the documentary courses lived. They didn't live in the TV department, they lived in the film department. So I had to transfer to the film department in order to teach documentary. And I started making lengthier documentaries there in a more of a film style rather than a public TV or television style, and just made work. I generally, for the past 15 years, have had no less than 3 projects going at any given time. I'll have one in pre-production, one that I'm shooting in the moment, and one that I'm still editing or sending around to film festivals. So I am not a person that adheres to the philosophy of one thing at a time. I have multiple things going on at any given time. And I guess I go by my dad's philosophy, old-fashioned, but it worked for me. A couple of parts of that philosophy are, he used to say, Lisa, be the first one in before your boss arrives and never go home before your boss does. You know, another thing he told me is wherever it is you're working, find out how to do everything in that workplace. And at one point at Channel 2, I was a utility person. I could work back in engineering, taking in feeds through acquisition. I could work on the assignment desk. I could shoot, I could edit. I was a producer. You know, whoever called in sick, throw Lisa, you know, in that position. And I think that really helped if nothing else, it gave me a good appreciation of what other people's jobs were so that I was kinder to them, in the process. And then another thing, I think is that you make a lot of work because maybe some of it'll stick. We don't all make perfect stuff. And I try to tell my documentary students, you're new at this, so just relax and don't try to make something perfect, because perfect is the enemy of good. You need to make a film, do your best, and realize that some parts of that film are going to be really good, and other parts of that film just aren't going to work. I've never made a perfect documentary. I've made some documentaries that had some really good moments, though. And I think the older you get, the more you redefine success. So for me, a successful film is one where I can show it and people will laugh at some moments. They'll get choked up in some other moments. They'll be really engaged in some moments. When I watch them, I can tell they're really watching it. That's what I'm aiming for now when I make a film, is making sure that I create some of those moments in the film. And then, of course, old Thomas Edison, the inventor of motion pictures, or him and a few other people, said that he was asked one time in his elder years, what inspires you to still be making work in your 80s? And he looked at the person and said, work should inspire your work. And by the way, if you haven't ever been down to Fort Myers to visit the Thomas Edison home, you should definitely do it. It's one of the most incredible historical spaces in the state of Florida. His lab is down there, his house and his lab. And you can walk through his lab and see his test tubes and his gadgets. You can see the little cot that he took naps on in the afternoon or in the middle of the night. So treat yourself and go down to Fort Myers and see Edison's property. So I guess we're at 4:15, Mike. I don't know if we have more time remaining. I'll turn it back over to you. And if anybody has questions, or if you want me to talk more about anything else as far as, distribution on public TV, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, let me just address a couple of things. Number one, I think anything that's being done on the data acquisition level is a good thing, right? Because we need that. We need a deeper understanding of the economics at work, and get back to a good place where, if you don't want to leave Florida, you don't have to. The reality in my career personally was, I started my film career, not my photographic career, but my film career in Orlando. And I have always said that all things happen in their time, right? And if you're the kind of filmmaker that needs extra time in a smaller market like Orlando, that's nothing to be ashamed of, and that it's perfectly fine for you to hone your craft in a place where there's less competition. The expectations are always the same. Let's not mistake that, okay? Because a good story is a good story no matter where you find it. And the criteria for what broadcasters are willing to put on the air is no different in Florida than it is in California. They have the same level of expectation, because the same economics are at risk if they put something on the air that can't succeed with the audience. So the idea that you're an inferior filmmaker if you're in Florida is a complete and utter fallacy. Okay. And I've been saying that for years, because when I finally did go to California, I was 37 when I went to California. So the first 18 years of my career, I was either in Florida or I was working nationwide in other markets in other parts of the country. Okay. And then with all of that, with a resume that included Bad Boys 2 and Too Fast and Too Furious and Monster and things of that nature, I went to California and they told me I wasn't a real filmmaker unless I was a California filmmaker. So there's industry bias that is also taking place. You don't have to go to California to find satisfaction and success in your own career. It's not a prerequisite. Okay. In my particular case, I had learned from a lot of California technicians, and I had always wanted to go out there and test myself in a market at that scale, but I waited. And only a fool would rush in where angels fear to tread. If you're not ready and you go too early, you don't stand a high chance of success just because of the numbers and the weight of what's working against you. So you learn your craft wherever you can be happy doing that thing, because ultimately that's the motivation. Making the film, making the documentary, making the movie, that's the reward. A job well done, something that you can appreciate years in it, years later, when you go back and you look at what you've yielded in your career and feel good about it. That's what's most important. Where you do it is secondary. The problem is where you do it often is tied to your economic stability. So that's the balance that we have to play all the time. Okay. But being a Florida, and I used to tell this to guys that wanted to join the union out in California, and the guys from Florida would call me, what do you think? You think I could be successful? And I say, I would pit you guys against anybody out here any day of the week, because your heart's in the right place and you have the same skills and the same capacity for success. You have to believe that it doesn't matter where you go, right? It's just economics of scale. That's all. It's still the same way to do the job. It looks the same. It has the same level of expectation. Okay. If you can get your head around the economics of scale, then if you're qualified in Orlando, you're qualified in LA. It's just that it gets bigger, and you can't let that be, you can't let that intimidate you. You have to just go in facing forward and put your best foot forward and have faith in the fact that what you've learned is solid and it works the same way. It's like physics, right? Gravity. Well, now we're learning gravity does work differently in different places in the universe, but for the most part, in our immediate area, which includes hundreds of millions of light years, right? Gravity works the same way on the moon as it works in Orlando, right? You can rely on that. Okay. If you learn well the things that you need to know, you can carry that knowledge with you wherever you go, and understand that it will be useful to you and it will help you integrate in whatever film society that you attempt to integrate into. Okay. And I was just a kid with no contacts and nobody in the industry to help me. And if I can do it, any one of you can do it. And you just have to make the decision. You have to invest, and then you have to commit. If you can do that, I could have stayed in Florida and probably would have had a very happy career, but I'm a little bit of a scrappy guy. And so I wanted to be measured against what I considered to be the best of the best. So that's why I went, but I didn't have to go. Didn't really want to go in the beginning, but I went. So the fact that if you want to stay in Miami and work, stay in Orlando and work, you'll find, like Lisa says, if you want it bad enough, you'll find the jobs. You will. Just have to have faith.
Can I also pitch in a few words from?
Absolutely.
So I actually have gone through a little bit of the exact same experience as well. After I graduated with my undergrad, as soon as I graduated, I was like, I have to find a job, but I didn't have the money nor the resources to actually go to back to LA or go to Atlanta. So what I had to do is I had to, reach out and start, networking, like joining up with Film Florida, but also just joining up with like the Tampa Bay Film Society or like a little small independent group called the LMAM, or Let's Make a Movie, or going over to conventions and talking to local independent filmmakers, that live in the state of Florida, and try to say, hey, let's network, let's socialize, and so on and so forth. For me, I literally had, as soon as I got out of college, I became a member of Film Florida. I became a member of the Tampa Bay Film Society. I even worked on, as an editor, my first editorial independent job as on a local film from Tampa. I even became a member of the Orlando Regional Chamber of Commerce and trying to start my own production studio here in Florida to try to help others like myself that don't want to go to, all these places because we don't have the money nor the resources. And I've seen people who have done those things. And some of them are making big on projects like the Suicide Squad and the Doom Patrol or whatever. But there are others who I've known who they had to start their own business, but their business is like selling equipment. And sometimes even their businesses don't really get huge successful. And that's one thing that I've learned from Florida is that you can find, like as they've said, you can find any job here in Florida, even though yes, it's not sometimes not paid, but it gives you the experience, it gives you the knowledge, and it gives you the education, and also gives you the credit. I don't know how many times I've worked on Full Sail students' films, just either as a script supervisor or a grip, or even like the LMAM, the Let's Make a Movie. I've worked as a script supervisor on 2 of their projects. And I've also was an extra. I've done editing for a local comic book artist who passed away in 2017, and I'm still working with The Widow. And actually, my feature film is actually dedicated for him, and what his dying wish was. So I'm actually working closely with The Widow, and she's and they're like a big, not really a big name people like Stan Lee or Jack Kirby, but they've known people with that, and so you don't know who you're going to meet and who they're going to give you connections with, and so on and so forth. So definitely get out there, try to socialize, try to network, because that's the key. I had to do that, and I even had to do that with a couple of my film crew members. Some of my film crew members, they're local professionals. Like we have a 50-year-old independent filmmaker who's also a Valencia professor, who's my cinematographer, Scott. And we also have an 80-year-old, my chief lighting and tech gaffer, who has done this for quite a long time. And he knew how to do, certain lighting techniques and so on and so forth. I recently just had brought on a lot of more Valencia students, even some BA students, and even students who are not really are in the film program, but want to learn about filming. And they've reached out to me through like LinkedIn and others, and even like at a cafe. And I got them, got to bring them on board. And sure enough, they actually got to learn so much, from these people and actually see how things work and so on and so forth. So you may never know who's around the corner, but yeah, there's a lot here in Florida that a lot of people don't really kind of see. They just see Georgia, they just see, California. I went out to California. I did an internship through Bob Jones's or Professor Jones's UCLA or Bust back in 2014. And let me tell you, I worked in Santa Monica, I worked in Venice, and even though I didn't get to those big name production companies, but still there's other things that you need to learn from, like how to handle agents, how to, balance a budget and so on and so forth, even if you're not working for like Universal. And so that's something that a lot of people don't really understand.
Good testimony.
Thank you.
So tell us what it's like to work with the local affiliates here in Orlando on some of your independent projects.
Well, good or bad. Basically, some of my experiences, I've had some really good experiences. I've had some really bad experiences. I can name a couple. Like for example, my first editorial job. I tried so hard to make this film look awesome, even though one, they didn't really focus on the continuity. And I tried my best to make sure that the continuity was still fixing, it still worked perfectly. But there's sometimes that the director would be like, no, or the producer would be like, no. And I'm like, it looks better with that than it does with your own kind of philosophy. But hey, I'm just coming out as a person. And then there's others, who I would say like just makes you feel like welcoming home. Like they make you feel like a family, and those are the people that you want to stick close to. You don't want to stick close to the people, and you'll learn this. You'll find out that, hey, I might want to work with this person, but then you find out, no, they're not really. I should work more closely with that person than I did anything else. I can testify with my own experience, you know, with my feature film that I'll be wrapping this weekend. I can testify to that. Like I've lost crew. I've even had to fight my first former producer and trying to not, you know, take away my project. I had to like do a whole lot, and I'm still doing a whole lot. But it just, like I said, just makes you find the right people, make you feel like a family, and you learn from others that kind of give you the icky vibes, you know.
So Dr. Mills, tell us about your family and your experiences in that realm, because I know that you have a lot of interesting stories. Before we lose your hair, I see that there's something that's going to need your attention pretty soon. I wanted to get your opinion on that.
Well, I just would add that if you are going to stay local at first, as we used to say in the news business, you want to make all your biggest mistakes in the smallest markets, right? So I started out in Jacksonville, which was a fairly small market at the time, but has really grown. And now Orlando's in the top 25. If you're going to stay local, just know that your reputation is going to get around in a small local area pretty quickly. So you want to guard your reputation by doing things like being reliable, showing up on time, doing what you say you're going to do, not overselling your abilities. You can always say, yeah, I've done this, this, and this, but I haven't done that, but I'm willing to learn. You know, so don't say, yeah, anything you can throw at me, I can do it, because that's not helpful to them. And it's definitely not helpful to you. So yeah, just it's a small community. So be nice to people, show up, help, stay late if you're needed. Don't be a clock watcher. So I would say that. And then, you know, a lot of the local people have been other places, and they can tell you about those places and help you get to those places. So even if you're not planning to go somewhere else right away, you can run into people here locally that can tell you what it's like there. So get them to tell you stories. Hey, I've really had fun working with you on set today. How would you feel about grabbing a cup of coffee on some Saturday morning and just telling me some war stories, you know, when you used to work out in LA? I mean, Mike, I'll bet you could fill a whole year's worth of Saturdays telling war stories from LA. And that would be really fun, you know. I've worked for nice bosses, and I've worked for terrible bosses. I've worked for mean ones, and I've worked for incompetent ones. And I've been on headphones when somebody out in the field got mad and slammed a mic on the ground, and I thought I'd lost my eardrum. I'm having problems hearing now because I spent 25 years wearing headphones in a control room. Protect yourself. I wish somebody had said that to me when I was 18. You know, just because everybody else on the crew goes out after they're offset and gets blottoed, doesn't mean you have to do that. Know your limits, develop healthy habits, get plenty of sleep, eat right. Look for the healthy choices from craft services. If there aren't any, ask for them when you can, and you'll do fine. You know, you really will be fine. If this is what you love to do, then you'll definitely figure it out.
I completely agree. And one of the things that I try to tell, you know, all of my students as often as possible is the industry is here, right? They call it Hollywood and they give it a geographic relationship, and they say, oh, well, this happens in New York and this happens in LA and this happens in Atlanta. It starts here and it's driven here. right?
I love that.
And so wherever you are, you could say in some sense, if Hollywood is your model, you're not talking about the place, you're talking about the aesthetic, you're talking about the approach to problem solving, and you're talking about the workflow, right? And that happens here and wherever you are, okay? Which is, I think, sometimes the difference. Folks say, well, it's only Orlando, so I only have to know this much, or I only have to be this good at something. No, you should strive to be the best you can be wherever you are, because proximity changes. What won't change, though, is your foundational set of beliefs and behaviors and your passion for what you're doing, right? If any of those things are in any way, flexible, then, maybe you have a different model in mind, or maybe you're best suited for a certain kind of work. Okay. But you should have the mindset all the time that you're capable of doing whatever professionally is asked of you at whatever level. And then it becomes a matter of scaling it to your area or your budget. Mostly it's scaling it to your budget. And the thing of it is now these geographical associations really become more about economics than they do about filmmaking. Because I can tell you that some of my best memories of movies that I've worked on were not $100 million movies or $200 million movies. They were $1 million movies. And $1 million movies are made in Florida all the time. Okay. The question becomes, how are you going to spend that $1 million? If you spend that $1 million wisely, the quality of experience and the quality that you can render with the technology and with the people available to help you make that film are comparable. That you can definitely punch above your weight with $1 million in Florida because of the difference in economics between here and LA, Chicago, New York, Atlanta. Okay. The $10 million in Atlanta or Los Angeles doesn't go nearly as far as $10 million goes in Florida, but you can do a lot with that kind of money. And there doesn't have to be any sacrifice of quality or sacrifice of heart. There has to be no sacrifice on the part of your audience to appreciate your vision and your story. So I agree with all of that. And I appreciate hearing from people that are advocates for, making it work wherever you are, but don't accept any limitations that are, imposed on you ideologically because maybe you're not in an economic center in the country. That doesn't really have anything much to do with it.
I just wanted to mention one other thing that hasn't popped up in this conversation, and that is live sports production. That's another thing that there's plenty of in Florida, and we don't talk about it much in the film program, but those opportunities are out there. I've freelanced at Jaguar games, holding parabolic mics, doing utility grip work, because no matter where you go, you'll learn something, that I'll guarantee. And if you're lucky, you'll earn a little bit of money, which is not bad to have. So just be flexible. You can work on your film projects and everything, definitely keep those rolling. But if an opportunity comes up for something like a utility grip at a football or basketball game or something, you should definitely do it, because those people are just as passionate about what they do as we are. A lot of them cross pollinate with other kinds of production. They're great contacts. Sports production is highly demanding. It's hard to hold a parabolic mic like this for 2.5 hours, and when the guy's rolling up and down the sidelines on some kind of a lift thing, and you got to make sure you get out of the way, and it was exciting.
I don't know if you guys know this, but NFL Films comes to Florida a lot. And 2 weeks ago, I had lunch with a friend of mine who is an asset manager for NFL Films and works on all of the games in Florida, and they fly him around the country frequently. And he is currently flying back from London. He just did 2 weeks in London for the 2 weekends of NFL film games that they had out there, the exposition games. But guess what kind of gear they're using at NFL Films at all the Buccaneers games, folks? Alexas, Steadicams, Chapman Olympian cranes, dollies, all the same audio that you would see on a production set on a feature film. A lot of that gear is the same by virtue of the digital revolution now. The cameras that are shooting NFL films for the, the Sunday afternoon games, Thursday night football, Monday night football, it's a lot of the same stuff. Okay, so it's absolutely good advice if you can develop contacts in that area of the industry to get some really good experience. In fact, once upon a time, I worked with a camera operator who shot for NFL films all the time. And as far as I know, he's still doing it, in addition to other things that, to make up his year economically. But, that's that infrastructure and that particular company has been doing it for decades, and their workflows are similar in a lot of ways to the things that we teach in the cinematic footprint. The gear's the same. A lot of the procedures are the same. The expectations of quality are the same, so that's really good advice, actually. And that's something admittedly, I don't think of a lot is the live sporting event potential that we have here. So
we've got all these professional sports teams in Jacksonville, Tampa, and Miami, and there's a lot of opportunity there. You kind of got to get into that network, but you can do it. You can find people to get into that.
Terrific. So you all should be like raring to go and get out there and get it done, huh?
Also, I do want to chime in. Also, try to go to local film festivals. You can learn so much from filmmakers in their techniques, and even try to network too. Back in, I would say like 2016, 2017, I actually had the honor to volunteer for a local independent film festival called Freak Show Horror Film Festival.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually know the owner of it, Robert Massetti, because I met him at a convention, and out of nowhere, it was just, I just met him, and I didn't know who he was, and I, talked to him and so on and so forth. But he gave me the opportunity to volunteer for his film festival. And what happened was I actually got to meet filmmakers from other countries. Like, I actually got to talk to two filmmakers that came from Ireland who shot a horror film on one of the sets of Game of Thrones. And I was like, how did you do that? And so we're talking back and forth and chit-chatting. And I think what was funny is I'm trying to remember his name. It's like Craig something or Clark or something. And he said, well, if you ever come to Ireland, look us up. We'll take you a tour. We'll even like have you on the film set and so on and so forth. And I'm like, cool. So I have him on Facebook, and I'm just like, hey, Clark, how you doing? I still can't get to Ireland. But like I said, try to, like, your best bet is the network. Like, be friends, don't hit yourself short. Just network as possible. That's the key thing. And it's helped me to do a lot. So, and don't be shy. Don't be shy.
You want to mention Game of Thrones? Here's a fun fact for all of you folks. Okay. Years ago, there was a young film student who went to UM down in Miami, University of Miami film program. Okay. Studied hard, got good grades, graduated, worked for a time with Valencia Community College and the director of the film program there, Ralph Clemente, and took his talents on the road. He ended up in California, and he ended up directing television shows at a low budget level and worked his way up. Well, he ended up directing the 3 culminating episodes of season 7 and the 3 culminating episodes of season 8 of Game of Thrones, and his name is David Nutter. And David Nutter graduated from University of Miami in about 1984, I believe, 85. Okay, so there's a really good example of some homegrown talent that didn't accept limitations, didn't accept no for an answer, held on to his dreams and pursued them doggedly until he got where he wanted to go. Okay. And Game of Thrones, and arguably is at the pinnacle of some of the achievement that's possible out there. And he's right from our backyard. Didn't you say you went to UM for a period of time, George? Or was it University of South Florida?
Miami-Dade.
I always get those confused. But homegrown talent, right? So you can't deny it. So there it is.
Well, I do have to say, I'm not actually homegrown in Florida. I'm actually originally from Illinois.
That's okay. We're all from somewhere else, right? I was born in New York, but don't hold that against me. Excellent. I want to thank you guys for joining us, Dr. Mills. Thank you for being generous with your time. I don't want to cut the conversation short. I'm more than willing to continue going here. I don't want to hold you away from something that's brewing over there at the office. But if you want to give us any more of your extemporaneous thoughts on, for instance, is there any current events that we need to be aware of out of Tallahassee, or current events out of Florida Film Office that might be germane to this conversation?
Well, yeah, let me mention a couple of other things. I'm in no hurry to go put any fires out, even though they're
Okay.
popping up. There are internships available in all of the film commissioner offices. And there's also an internship available at the Florida Film Commission office in Tallahassee. And you don't have to be physically in Tallahassee to do the internship. It can be done virtually. So I think that a lot of those internships are overlooked because they're not sexy, right? They don't involve any kind of gear. But what's great about them is that you kind of get your finger on the pulse of production in a particular city, and you make friends with the people that are working with the production companies, and they can refer you to them and give you contacts. So I wish that I saw more of our film students doing these internships in the film commission offices. One thing I haven't talked much about is the distribution of my films on television. And I just want to mention that if you're going to do something like that down the road, get a separate budget going for that. It's like remaking your whole film all over again. It has to be reformatted technically. For television, you often have to pay a specialized post-production house that has particular kinds of scopes and things that they need to run your film through. They'll have to convert it from 24p to 30i or 60i. It costs money. And you also have to set aside money to clear all the copyrighted material in your film. So if you have copyrighted music, or if you're using any kind of trademarked material or archive photos or footage like we use in documentary all the time, you'll have to pay for licensing for all of that. So that's sort of down the road probably for you. Right now, you just want to try to focus on sending your films off to competitions and film festivals to make a name for yourself. But let's say your film is in a festival and a distributor calls you and says, hey, we think that we could get your film on Netflix or the documentary channel or something like that. Just, you need to ask a lot of questions about who's going to pay for the QC and for the licensing. If they think they can make some money off of it, they'll cover that and take it out of the money you would have made, and then suddenly it seems like the money you would have made is equal to the money they had to spend clearing copyright, and therefore you get nothing. So that's sort of been my experience, with film distribution. But in terms of making films, we all know the challenges. It's the same no matter what film you're going to make. It's getting a good team together, a reliable team, setting realistic expectations and goals. And like I said, just doing the best you can and hoping for some good moments. If you can't make a perfect film, try to put as many great moments in your film as you can, and your audience will still enjoy it. I can vouch for that.
No such thing as a perfect film.
Mhm.
I can tell you, I mean, my students know me as an advocate of trade unionism and, shoot for the moon, and anything that you get, if you fall short, anything you get is a bonus, but go for, go big or go broke. But I can tell you in all honesty that, some of my fondest experiences are, not only the couple of little low budget movies in my past, but I shot and directed 2 documentaries of my own. And coming from a studio environment and studio resume and experience in that vein, I found the experience of shooting documentaries on a small scale to be some of the most fulfilling work that I've ever done. I found the process very intimate, and I found it very enlightening in a lot of cases. They were some of the few times when I was um, responsible for the whole ball of wax, the creative concerns, the economic concerns, the logistical concerns, all of that. I'm shooting the thing, and I'm paying for the hotel room, and I'm policing up the trash at the end of a shoot day. I'm doing all of those things. Chief cook and bottle washer, right? But there was a certain profound satisfaction in that process. And so I don't want to misrepresent myself to anyone when I say, the only way for you to be successful is for you to, go to Hollywood and duke it out with the big dogs. That's one way, but there's lots of ways to achieve satisfaction in your career. And there are lots of ways for you to realize success and to be thankful for your career and to enjoy your career and to look back fondly on your career when that career is waning. And so documentaries are something that I am actually very in close to my heart in many respects. And I don't ever want anybody to think that I would discount the notion that documentaries are not a legitimate part of the film process, because they are. I can tell you, I drew on every skill that I had ever learned on other people's movies when I made my own. So there's nothing lost in the process of shooting documentaries that can't be learned from and expanded upon, and that can't either contribute to other aspirational goals or bring closure to some aspirational goals, or to reconcile the experience of a lot of different activities and bring it all under one sheltering umbrella of understanding of what it is to be a filmmaker. So I think if your goal is to follow in the shoes of somebody like Dr. Mills, I think that there's fewer finer examples of filmmaking and fewer better mentors that you could ask for. So if this is part of your thing, and I suspect maybe on a certain level, Sean, I might be speaking to you. And there's a number of folks in some of my other classes who are specifically interested in documentary, but they're afraid that somehow they'll miss out on something if they only make films on that scale. And I think you're not missing anything. Not really.
Yeah, I know. I looked at the curriculum for UCLA and USC one time when I was writing some silly administrative report. And in looking at that curriculum, what was interesting to me, and I brought this up, is that those programs have their BFA students make one doc and one experimental film before they are allowed to make a narrative. And I think that, I don't know exactly what their reasoning is, but I suspect that the reasoning is that you need to learn how to tell somebody else's story well before you try to tell, your own, the one that you've made up in a script. And then the experimental films really expand your mind in abstract ways, creative ways, conceptually. So I really wish in our program that our students had an opportunity to make all three, and experience all three of them. And I have had some students figure out a way to do that through independent studies. We just have such a scale that we're dealing with so many students in our program right now. It's not practical, but Yeah, I tell the documentary students that you have to love people, though, to make documentaries. It's not exactly a kind of filmmaking you can do as an introvert. You have to win people's trust. You have to be able to listen to them and converse with them and empathize with them. And, I've had a few students in my documentary classes that struggled with having conversations, with picking up the phone, and talking to people. And, so I think it is a unique kind of filmmaking, but definitely one that you can learn a lot from, for sure.
Amen. I tell everybody all the time, it's no industry for the faint of heart, right? You can't be
Right.
timid. There's no room for timidity in the film industry at any
No.
level, at any level. And sometimes you have to be exceptionally charming when you've got no money, but you have big ambition. So, if you can't talk to folks, articulate your ideas and bring them on board with your passion so that they're excited about your project and they want to help. They want to lend a hand. They want to maybe invest in what you've got going on. That doesn't happen if you don't have the ability to reach out. You can't do
Right.
this. You're not on an island. And believe it or not, you won't be alone either. I say I shot 2 documentaries myself. I didn't do them myself, but I had help, and I had good people helping me. You got to be able to reach out. You have to avail yourself, allow yourself to be a little bit vulnerable at times. I expect, especially when you're asking for financing or asking for help and you don't have a lot of assets at your disposal to, pay people maybe what they expect to make on a job or maybe even what they're actually worth. So you have to be able to enlist with your ability to rhetorically appeal to your help, to your community, to your resources, and to your audience. And that takes the ability to reach outside of your comfort zone. It's not easy to, maybe take a pitch meeting and then ask for, distribution funding or post-production, financing. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So what do
Well,
you
it's
think,
been
guys?
fun talking to you guys today. I wish you all the best. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me or come by. And we love to hear feedback from students. And Mike, thank you so much for having me today. As a professor, I love to talk about myself and I love to talk about my work, and I'll take any opportunity that is provided to do that. And we're lucky to have you here teaching with us. Really appreciate all that you're doing. And Mark, thank you for being here too. I'm looking forward to being with you on a Film Florida panel, November 19th. We'll publicize that around. One of the things I'm working on, guys, is trying to get more notices about all this stuff on those monitors downstairs. And getting them, but until then, keep an eye on your email. We're sending all the information about all these events and opportunities by email. I know you get bombarded with email, but just keep an eye out on those emails and we'll let you know about other opportunities to hear people speak and see special films.
Lisa, is there a link to an email that you would use for students who want to reach out to you or reach out to Film Florida?
Sure, I will put my email in the chat here.
Thank you.
And then I'll go ahead and put the Film Florida website in there. And there's information at the website if you're interested in reading more about memberships or the legislation that they're working on. And, there's a lot of other organizations too, Women in Film and Television. There's bunches of them out there. And you could look at the member list. There's a hint for you. Go to the Film Florida website and go to membership and just look at the list of people that are members of Film Florida. There's a great contact list for you for free right there on the website. All these production companies and film commission offices and individuals and check it out.
So we've had Janelle Jordan on this
Oh,
semester.
good.
And she came out representing Production Hub, spoke a little bit to us about women in film. I've got Lindsay coming out in a couple of weeks to talk about more about women in film and the Orlando Film Office. And so you can kind of see now how we're putting this list together, right? So we've had Production Hub is telling you how to list yourself and where people can go to find you if they want to hire you for a job. So that's about you reaching out to the industry to say, hey, I'm here, right? And then you have organizations like Film Florida, where you go to a meeting of the Film Florida, and this now is a different kind of environment. This is professionals that have gone far and wide, and they're coming back in essence to report, this is what I'm doing. This is what's going on. This is what it's like to be out there functioning in the environment. And they're coming back and they're sharing and comparing stories, right? Different kind of an organization now. Both have their value to you as a filmmaker, and both are doing really kind of distinctly different things. One is putting you out there to the world, and the other is bringing the world to you to tell you what's going on. And you think you need both sides of that conversation. And I think Women in Film is going to add a dimension to that as well, because now it's going to be focusing on, other kinds of issues that have, been, for lack of a better word, problems in the industry for the longest time, problems of access, problems of exclusion and bias. And so we've got organizations like that are working hard on your behalf as well. So I hope that you enjoyed, hearing about Film Florida. If you think of any questions after we adjourn this meeting, you can always send me an email and I'll get it to Lisa, or you can email her directly now, thanks to the notes in the chat, and make those questions known to her. Okay. I know that sometimes we don't think of things right away. It takes a little time for a conversation like this to marinate, lots to unpack. So, if something pops up, please reach out. Okay. The worst thing you could do is not ask if you have a question, right? So please remember that access is not exclusive to the capstone session on Zoom, right? We're available to you. That's what our office hours are all about. That's what emails are all about. Okay. We're here with you to help you get through this experience while you're here at UCF. Okay. So if you need us, reach out. Okay. Well, what do you say, folks? I mean, I think this is a pretty intensive conversation. I certainly enjoyed it. Thank you, Dr. Mills, for being generous with your
Welcome.
time.
Very
Has,
welcome.
has anybody got any questions that we can address at the moment? Any business to bring up for consideration? Or should we adjourn this conversation for this afternoon? Fair enough. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Well, George and
Move.
I need to speak to you.
Okay, you want to hang
Oh.
out? Okay. About your Coke thing? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second the motion to adjourn?
Yep.
Very well. Thanks for coming, everybody. I appreciate it, like always. And
Thank you,
again,
guys. Thanks,
Ciao.
Mike.
Thank you for
Thanks,
your
Mark.
time.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
a bunch.
have a good afternoon. So George and Sean, what do we got going on?
Michael
here?
Walsh. So did you get the budget?
Let me have a look. It's not coming through on my Outlook, but let me go into the course
CF email?
itself and open up that. It's supposed to tell me when I get an email in web courses, it's supposed to send me a follow-up email in Outlook, but it has not done that. So let me find out why.
All right. Well,
Uh,
been working on that. Got up to 15 grand. Got up to
here
15
we are.
grand with the budget, which is I'm thinking what they're looking for.
Okay. Is it okay if I leave the recording going, or should I turn the recording off for the meeting? I can certainly do that, and we can continue talking about your.
Yeah, I think turning off the recording would do well.
Okay, so at this point in time, I'm going to end the recording for the capstone folks that didn't have the benefit of the live session. You can look for this link on YouTube very shortly, within about 4 hours. And of course, if you have any questions about the conversation that took place today, which is October 21st, 2021, shoot me an email on web courses and I'll respond to you as soon as I can. All right, this is the end of the official recording of the Zoom for Capstone 1 for Thursday.